I start by prefacing that there are probably more efficient ways to do this challenge, but this is the way that I chose to do it. So I looked at all of these words that we have to input, and I thought, okay, I want to split these all out into their individual letters, and then maybe I want to compare the first letter to the last letter, so on and so forth. Okay, that's kind of sounded like an iterative macro. So let's start off with that. So first of all, I made sure everything was lowercase because I think this Koran before had a capital K, and that's going to cause us issues if we're trying to match up letters. So we need to at least make sure that they're all the same case. So we went with lowercase. Then I just duplicated that field basically, so I've got letters at the moment is exactly the same as words, and I also wanted to know the length of each of these words, which is going to help me when I'm sort of looping through, from the end of the word to the beginning. So then I use my regex tool just with a full stop on that letters column, tokenize split to rows so that I get all of my letters split out for each of my words. And I want to number the order of these rows. These rows, yeah, so the order of the letters basically is what I mean. Okay, so I did that by just grouping by my words, having this set to 0 for rows that don't exist, and just doing row -1 of my new field order +1. So just add 1 to the previous row, so it means that if that row there above here doesn't exist, it's a 0. So then I get 1, 2, 3, da 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 da, so on and so forth. Okay, so now it's time to go into the iterative macro element. So I come into my iterative macro and I take my order equal to 1, so my first row, basically my first letter, but I'm adding on the iteration number. So that will be 0 for the first iteration, so the first run through of the macro. So this will just be 1 for that first one. And then similarly, I want to only have my last letter. So my order is equal to the length, but minus that iteration number. So that'll be a 0 for the first run through, but otherwise it'll be a 1, 2, 3. So it'll help to each sort of will move into the middle. And I have real issues thinking about, how do I treat differently like even length words and odd length words? And I kept putting it towards the start of this, but I think it worked out better where I ended up putting it. So we join these together with our words and our letters. So to see which ones have the same first and last letter on that first iteration. So you can see that some of them start to drop out here. So, ooh, that's interesting. Oh, I know. So the reason it's playing up at the moment, if I just run that, is because I was playing with the ordering before. So there's none that are coming out the left here or the right. Everything that we're feeding into this macro, this is when I was playing around. This input data is only a subset of the data set that you start off with because I'd already filtered it to. I'd already basically done some of this outside of the macro when I realized I could do it all in the macro. Well, lots of caveats there, but basically all of these in the join have the same first letter and last letter. So that's what's happening at this moment on our, iteration 0. Okay, so then I want to check, okay, have we reached the middle of the word? So that's the stage that I'm going to do here. And this is where it matters if the word is an odd or even length. So if mod length 2 equals 0, so that means in modular arithmetic, does it equal 0? So is it an even basically? So for example, 4 mod 2, 2 goes into 4 without a remainder. There's nothing left over, that means it's even. If it was 5 mod 2, that would be 1 because there's 1 left over when you divide 5 by 2, so on and so forth. So if it's an even, then I know that my letter that's kind of coming from the start, the position of that letter, and coming from the end, so coming from the start, coming from this root, coming from the end, coming from this root, they are going to end up being 1 apart. So say, for example, if we take the really simple example of ABBA, then we'll get to position number 2, and we'll get to position number 3, and 3 minus 2 is going to be 1. So if they are equal to 1, so I know it's not equal, then they'll flow out of this F anchor. So that will be that word done. We have confirmed all the letters are in such a way that it is a palindrome. Okay, and then if it's odd, so if it's not even, it must be odd, then we will get to the exact same letter in the middle. So if I look at, say, Bob, for example, then we will have added 1 to our starting character, so 1 plus 1, 2. We will have minus 1 from the length, 3 minus 1, 2. So if those orders are equal, if we've reached the middle letter, then also don't keep flowing round the macro, otherwise it would just keep going and going. We need a stopping place, so this is how we're stopping it in this instance. Okay, so for all other instances where we haven't reached the middle yet, then continue on. We're just joining that back to our input. So the reason we're doing that obviously is because we only have 1 row at the moment per word. We want all of those letters to be back. So we join it back to our start on the words, drop all the additional columns, and that is what's going to flow around our iteration or our iterative macro. And just to show you how that's set up in the settings, then we've got our iteration input is our only macro input tool, of course, and our iteration output is this top one. So I always like to rename my iteration output so I know which one it is that's going to go looping back round to the start, whereas this one just nothing happens with these records. They just stack on top of one another at the end. Okay, so I can hide my interface designer again, come back to this, and we can see the output from our macro. We get 128 palindromes. Yay, that's exactly what we want according to the output. So we just do a quick count there, rename that to be palindrome count, and then we want to see the start letters of all of these words. So left of words 1 gives us the first character, group by that start character, count it, sort it in a descending order, give us the first one, and then we can just append those together so we can match the output. So I think that was a good iterative macro exercise. Definitely took me a little bit of thought, but one that I'll definitely use going forwards in training macros. So thank you very much for watching.